Make a pump action blaster, somebody's gonna want it to be lever action. That's just kind of the rules of nature for when it comes to Nerf blasters. And I don't blame them. Lever action's freaking rad in my opinion, and there's not a single point where I wouldn't rather have a lever action blaster than a pump action. I know pump action is more effective, but lever action's just fun. And that's kind of the name of the game today. Fun. This blaster isn't going to change how everything works. You could just buy a Caliburn, make it hit 350 FPS and be on your way. But Captain Slug's latest creation is something the community has been clamoring for quite some time. Meet Flak, a lever action blaster that, at least this version, and trust me, there's a lot of different versions of this blaster. You could just change out basically the bolt and the front of the plunger tube here and fire a completely different thing, uses Trilogy Shells. Which means for everybody that wanted a lever action trilogy, now you have that option. Let's take a closer look, shall we? That's satisfying. Now, I already know what you're thinking. A few of you saw that opening footage of the firing demo and thought, oh, that's not very impressive. Why would I ever want something like that? And you know what? You probably wouldn't, because you're obviously devoid of fun. A lot of you are getting your hands on the Adventure Force Nexus Pro. It's an amazing blaster. It's one of the best values you could possibly buy in the entire hobby. It hits harder than most of you have ever fired a foam dart before, and your entire world now revolves around that. But performance is not everything. This isn't some revolutionary blaster that's going to fundamentally change the game. This thing is just stupid fun, and it's pretty good at what it tries to do. Now, Captain Slug sent this off to me, and I actually was the one who asked him how about getting Trilogy Shells for it, because I have a few of them. And he wasn't considering doing Trilogy Shells until the very end, but it looks like that got bumped up a little bit, because this is a very early version of the blaster. Now, right now, you can buy this and basically any other setup for this thing. Actually, we should talk about that. This one shoots Trilogy Shells. There's also a front end that will shoot Sledgefire and Spring Thunder shells. And if you want magazine-fed options, you've got breeches for both rival magazines and short dart magazines like the Talon. And yes, there's even front ends that shoot Demolisher rockets and even want to shoot vintage ballistic balls. And hey, if this video does pretty well, I'll print out all of the other front ends and we can test all of them in another video. So hit like, hit subscribe, leave me a comment down below. All that stuff massively helps the channel, and we can see what exactly the Flak is capable of. And that's just what Slug came up with. The cool thing about Slug's designs is he's usually really good about letting other people tinker and come up with new things for them. So just about every single thing on this blaster can be customized. And yes, it's lever action. When you prime it, you can see this arm right here actually pushes the breech forward, which has a little ejector right up here that will knock out the original shell. And as you can notice, the plunger rod is moving back. So that's what this lever right here does, and that completes the action. And the entire thing is elastic band powered. This one currently has 3 elastic bands on it, though you can put 4 on it for more power. More about that at the end of the video. Actually, I'll have a few design notes for Slug because I've ran this thing pretty hard over the last couple of days. Now, if this was a breech, you'd just close it, it would have chambered a dart, you could fire it, and just repeat the action over and over again. But for a Trilogy Shell, you have to crack it open, load in a shell every single time. So it's basically just a lever action trilogy. Now, I chose the Trilogy because these are the shells that you can currently still get if you're looking for them. Sledgefire shells have been off the market for quite some time, and not everybody has access to a 3D printer or wants to pay for individual Spring Thunder shells. And as you'll see from the firing footage, it performs admirably, but it's not going to blow you away when using the Trilogy shells. Overall, I really like the look of this blaster. It's not going to be for everybody, but that's the cool thing about Captain Slug's designs. He's not trying to please everybody. He's trying to make something that just looks out of this world ridiculously awesome And I believe the Flak definitely hits that mark. The foregrip up here is like the one that's on the Pyragon, although it is completely customizable because it's on a Picatinny rail. I just happen to like this one because I can get a good grip on it and then kind of pivot the blaster forward like that to prime it. There's a top rail right here, which you can affix with any kind of sight you happen to want that's Picatinny. And then the stock is entirely optional. I really love the design of this stock, and it's very, very sturdy. The grip is a little bit small. It fits me perfectly, but you can kind of see if you have big, huge, monkey hands, it might be an issue for you, so keep that in mind. But I'm sure a larger grip will come out at some point. Again, 3D printed, you can customize whatever you want with it. And most of the hardware is pretty standard at this point. The U-channel design that he's been using for the Talon Claw U and the Caliburn U is a really good upgrade from the original system because these things are really sturdy and there's almost no flex in the entire blaster, which means using it is a lot more efficient. And the plunger tube is absolutely massive. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the diameter is much, much bigger than that of a Talon Claw or a Caliburn. Seriously, it's massive. And as you can listen, there's not a whole lot of that disgusting 3D printer rubbing friction nylon sounding ew. It actually sounds really nice to use. And since it's using elastic bands, they're really easy to replace or tone down the power or tone up the power, and it's virtually silent. The trigger is also really nice and responsive. It uses a similar type of sear mechanism to the Caliburn or the Talon Claw. So let's take her outside and see exactly how she performs with some 3D printed shells, and of course the original Trilogy Shells. Alright, we're gonna start off with 4 bands on the blaster, just using a variety of Trilogy Shells, and I'll shoot one of the 3D printed shells so we can see how far that shoots, and then we'll transition to the 3-band setup it came with. We gotta be like extra super careful. There we go. That in. I actually have not range tested this yet, so I'm gonna give it a bit of an angle because that's just how it's going to happen. Oh, that was actually quite surprisingly good. That was, I believe, about the Trilogy, if not a little bit farther. That's satisfying. The 3D printed shells have longer barrels on them, so they usually work better. Let's see what happens here. Well, that was about the same, actually. Right, I've removed one of the bands, and now we're going to do it with just 3 and see how much of a performance hit there is. Starting with the 3D printed shell. It's about the same, although the 3D printed shells are definitely a little bit better. Yeah, okay, that's a little bit of a performance hit. For some reason, one of those darts just won't travel very far. There we go. Well, that was about the same. Huh. Overall, even though I didn't pay for this, it's about $100 for a do-it-yourself kit, or $45 if you want just the hardware to print out your own, and there's not a whole lot of 3D printing going on here, to be perfectly honest. It performs admirably. 3D printed shells do a little bit better, and I think the community could benefit from some slightly better 3D printed shells for the Trilogy, because the ones I found, the person admits they haven't even tested them, and they kind of work, but they're really inconsistent. And the standard NERF Trilogy shells are awful because they have basically no barrel in them whatsoever. So I think this thing's capable of hitting harder, but you have to remember that shooting 3 darts is a lot more taxing on a blaster than shooting 1. And if you just wanted to shoot a single dart, the short dart breach for this thing will hit up to 150 FPS. And without the stock, it'd be a pretty compact little package, all things considered. It's also like flat on the side, so I really do dig that. You could have a nice little scabbard for it and put on your waist and feel pretty cool. And it's entirely customizable by the user. I mean, there's not a whole lot of parts right now, but in the future, there certainly will be. Now, the design is not perfect, so I did originally get this thing out of the box and start throwing the 4th band on this thing because I wanted a little bit more power, and it feels a lot more consistent with the 4 powered bands, which Slug has 3D printed these little caps for for them so you don't just have balls of knotted up elastic on there. That actually is really nice, and I highly compliment that design. But that might be where some of my issues come from. Now, I've ran probably about 150 shells through this thing. I had a lot of fun with it before I even shot the video, and I'm glad I took the time because I do have some design notes for Slug, and while these are problems, they will most likely be fixed hours after this video goes up, so don't worry if you plan on buying one right now. This is a very, very early version, and for all I know, Slug has already fixed them. I didn't make it through a lot of shots before my catch mechanism kind of rounded over, so it doesn't catch nearly as soon as it needs to, and these kind of priming hammer things right there, the biggest issue I have is this. It's now locked up. I can't do anything with this blaster right now because the priming mechanism is now caught underneath the roller that it uses to slide against, and I had to prime it back all the way because it wouldn't catch sooner because the catch has been kind of sanded down. So that catch needs to be designed a little bit differently so it doesn't round over, and the little priming hammer things need to be slightly longer so they cannot go underneath the roller and jam up the entire mechanism, because it's really easy when you're priming this thing to just kind of rank on it almost about until you hear a click pretty much. And now that's a lot more difficult. I also do wish that this closed a little bit sooner when it came to using the Trilogy Shells, because it really does not squeeze very hard against this foam, and I found out that if I held it down just a little bit more, I got a much better seal out of it, so making that so it just kind of closes a little bit sooner, puts a little bit more pressure on that foam pad will really help the performance. And honestly, unless you don't have a 3D printer and have no access to any kind of Sledgefire Shells, I would totally just go for that option. This one with the Trilogy Shells is just dumb fun. It's not going to be a highly competitive option, but it is a lever action shotgun that is super short and awesome, and you could definitely use it in a war. And for all I know, there's already a lever action magazine fed that uses Trilogy Shells or Spring Thunder Shells or something like that. That is, again, entirely possible. But I am excited to see what happens with this blaster in the future because it has so much potential, and it is, in my opinion, a complete Swiss Army knife of a blaster because you can fire basically any dart out of this thing, no matter what. But that's my thoughts on Flak. But of course, I'm not the only one that matters, and most importantly, Slug's gonna be reading that comment section, so make sure you let Captain Slug know what you think about this blaster. It seriously is a wonderful blaster that can do a whole bunch of different things, and it's gonna be fun to print out all the different front ends and have this thing firing all sorts of different darts. But hey, I'm Walcom S7, thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you very much to Captain Slug for sending this thing off to me. I absolutely love it. It is definitely going to be in my war bag. I love 3D printed blasters, and I would use this honestly any day over a Caliburn because I don't really like the Caliburn at all. I don't like big rifle blasters. This is a heck of a lot more fun for me. And of course, I hope to see you in an entirely different